thank you for coming on.
Absolutely.
You're the second Ranger that we've had on, but the first 175 guy. We had Dylan on in the first episode, who was a founding member of DECO 375.
Okay, hell yeah.
And I know your service and your deployments are a little bit more recent, which I think speaks to a really interesting time period for the Ranger Regiment. We harp on it a lot in this podcast, but there's a lot about that time period that's almost kind of criminally neglected in our opinion. You know, that second half of the GWAT, going further from, post 2014, post 2015, the regiment was running, as you know, deployments and programs all over the world. There's people that don't really know what Team BAF was or what the regiment was doing in places like Iraq and Syria. And, we want to talk about you two and your path to the regiment, the podcast, and what you're doing with the Rockwell Designs, and just in general what you've been up to since leaving the Army, man.
Sure, yeah. I'm ready to get into it all.
Cool. Jumping into it real quick, something lighthearted. Since we mentioned Dylan earlier with 375, something that might be worth mentioning is if you want to start with the differences between the three line battalions. I mean, I know you got 175, 275, and 375. What's that all about, man?
All right. So, I mean, obviously they got the cultural differences being, based around different areas of the U.S. So you have 375 at the flagpole, which is where the 75th headquarters is located. And then you have 175 out on the coast in Savannah, Georgia. So those are the two Georgia battalions. Then I guess you have Allred, which I don't know a whole lot about. But then you have 275 all the way out on the West Coast. And of course, being the type A personalities we all have going to regiment, there's always going to be some kind of rivalry, between the battalions. So third bat has the reputation of being, the angry bat, or the kind of the maybe the standard bearers, if you will, just because they are so close to headquarters, and they get kind of a little bit of not special treatment, but they get to test out some stuff, and then they're kind of like centrally located where that command structure is. So it's kind of a unique environment for them versus the other two battalions are away from that. So they're kind of a little bit more relaxed. 375 is very much about standards. I mean, all of the battalions are all about standards, obviously, but they're very much the type to make sure that everyone's wearing duties during the day and stuff. Like at 175, like if we weren't going into headquarters and if we weren't like training for a range or doing hip pocket training, we were hanging out in PTs for most of the time. Don't know if it was the same. I think it's about the same up at 275. And then 275, we love them, but we jokingly call them Fat Bat. I don't know where that reputation came about or that joke came about. I don't think there's a whole lot of truth to it, but
yeah, I'm obviously not a ranger, but I would assume it has something to do with the fact that they have their own DFAC or whatever in their compound.
Oh, I think yeah. I think that's where it stemmed from. They have a solid DFAC from my 275 buddies that I'm still friends with. They would talk about that stuff all the time. It's like, man, we were using the regular army DFAC on Hunter because there's only one. We used to have our own, and then they closed it down. And that was like way before my time. And then 175 is kind of like the frat bat, I guess, because we're on the beach. We're not really in a military type town like JBLM, where 275 is. It's a huge base. It's the Air Force, Army. They got a whole division up there. And then 175, we're technically tied in with Fort Stewart, but we're like an hour drive from Stewart. So we're not like having to deal with a whole bunch of regular Army folks. And then we are in Savannah, which is, one of the better places to be stationed. There's Georgia Southern there. There's Savannah College of Art and Design. And then obviously the beach. So, beach bat, first bat. So we're kind of, I guess, the frat bat, going out and partying all the time. But the same could be said for the other battalions. It's really a big fraternity at the end of the day of dudes that will kill you.
Yeah, starting off lighthearted, I fully recommend anyone on a weekend to go on Snap Maps and check out what's happening in Savannah, because some of the stories coming out are pretty crazy.
It's wild. I mean, I have friends there still. I'm talking to a girl that's out there, but she was telling me, she's like, yeah, there was like a shooting like last weekend, and then just all this crazy shit. Like downtown is it's kind of a lawless place because you're allowed to drink in the streets.
Right.
Savannah is unique. You can take a to-go cup and you can take your drink to the next bar and literally be drinking in the streets, which is a pretty unique kind of thing out there. And yeah, it's an interesting environment. Savannah's a wild place. I was just out there for St. Patrick's Day. The the Ranger Regiment, or the First Battalion rather, marches in the parade. And it used to be like when I was in, it was pretty lawless during that. Like people would be freaking hammered in formation, and girls be running out and kissing you, and it was kind of a party. And then we kind of ruined that in 2019. We got a little too rowdy, and I think there was some senator or some governor that was there, someone important on the
Right.
civilian side of politics, and they weren't very impressed by us being letting our hair down for a little bit. Um, but yeah, Savannah's a good place. I miss it.
Yeah, not to keep getting sidetracked, but I remember seeing
No,
a
you're good.
video of some public affairs officer in the army saying that they don't want the girls coming up to kiss the rangers anymore because it might make some folks uncomfortable. And I'm like, yeah, I really don't think any junior ranger is gonna be complaining that they have sorority girls coming up and kissing them on the cheek.
You would think that's what happens, but most of the time it's like these like older ladies, like these cougars or like grandmas that are coming out and kissing you. But I think they allow like wives, legitimate, like, okay, this is your wife, or like this is your girlfriend, like you can go out and kiss them, kind of thing.
I
Um,
gotcha. Do you get a
yeah.
chance to work with any of the other battalions during your time in, either through like Ranger Rendezvous or on deployments?
So I never got the chance to go to rendezvous, and then on deployments, right? So we're cycling out, so we're replacing the entirety of a battalion. So our rotation cycle is we'd be relieving 375, and then when we were done in country, it'd be 275 coming to replace us. And there's not really, just because of how the train up cycles and deployment cycles work, there's not really a whole lot of inner regiment, I guess, training events where you're training with another battalion. I mean, that might change here as the GWAT has kind of pretty much winded down, um, where they might start doing maybe regimental size, or a couple battalion size training events. But yeah, I never really got to, outside of like going to Ranger School, which is where you kind of make friends from other battalions who are maybe you're in your squad. You don't really work a whole lot with the other battalions outside of maybe or going to other training schools like Master Breacher, or some of the driving courses, or maybe sniper school where you might run into a ranger from another battalion. But it's pretty uncommon that you get to work with the other battalions.
Understood. So, going back to your early life a little bit with as much detail as you're comfortable, if you want to talk about where you're from and how you grew up and exactly what got you into the Army and the Ranger Regiment.
Okay, yeah. I'll keep it brief because I could talk for hours about this subject, but I'll try and give a good executive summary. So, born in Utah, I grew up Mormon, LDS. Lived in Utah for a few years, moved out to California about 9 years, and it was around my junior high kind of years that I kind of started. I've always been interested in guns and military and all that kind of stuff. Um, Staging Lego battles or playing Nerf, having Nerf wars in the neighborhood or airsoft wars. So I've always had kind of like that, I don't know, that kind of that kind of spark in me of I like, being able to be, I guess, violent for lack of a better word, like having the capability of that. Or it was just cool to me. Like I wasn't allowed to play a whole lot of like first person shooters. So I was a fan of like just watching the trailers for like Call of Duty, or like gameplay footage from like the Call of Duty games. And I remember it was like Black Ops, when the first Black Ops came out, just watching the trailer over and over. I'm like, that looks cool. I want to do that kind of shit. So I started, researching the different stuff, and I'd read a lot of books about SEALs, but I was like, I can swim, but I don't really want to do that for my job. Um, and then I found out about Green Berets, and I was like, maybe I'll go SF. SF sounds pretty cool. I liked the mission set at the time, and I was like, that's pretty dope. As I got a little bit older, I found out about Ranger Regiment. And at this point, we'd moved back to Utah, like my sophomore year of high school. And it was kind of, I had a couple years left of high school, and I was like, all right, I got to start figuring out what I want to do, because I was also kind of fell away from the church at that point. Like I really kind of stopped believing, stopped kind of going to church. My parents, my whole family's still very much LDS, and they were like kind of expecting me to go serve a mission. For people that don't know, like it's not a requirement, but it's heavily encouraged to go serve a 2 year mission for dudes and a year and a half for girls. Um, Serve a mission for the church and go proselytize, anywhere in the world, really, just about, short of like China or the Middle East, some other small countries. But I really didn't want to do that. And I was like, I'm going to join the Army right out of high school. Like, I didn't have an interest in going to college. Like, I got good grades in high school and stuff, but I was like, I want to go do cool shit. So, uh, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna join the Army. I'm gonna join the Army. I found out about Ranger Regiment, found out about the Option 40 program because it was gonna be between Option 40 or 18 X-ray. So I was, doing more research. I was like, man, 18 X-ray is a long pipeline. And it's like I kind of was able to read the writing on the wall with the war kind of having gone on for so long. I'm like, this can't go on forever. It's like I'm kind of in a prime position to try and get in and get some of that adventure, that action before we're done. And I was like, Ranger Regiment has the fastest, special operations pipeline. Like you can go through basic training, airborne, RASP, and you can be deployed literally the week after you show up to your battalion, and it does happen. And I'm like, that's what I want to do. Sign me up. So I brought the recruiter home when I was 17 to get to I was under the impression that at the start of the fiscal year was when all the contracts were released. And so it was like October of 2014. I was 17 years old, about to turn 18 a couple months later. But I was like, hey, I want to be able to get one of these early contracts, before everyone else snags them up. So I brought the recruiter home. My parents were like, what? I'm like, yeah, I need you guys to sign the waiver so I can join when I'm 17, even though I'm not going to ship, obviously, till I'm 18. And they were a little surprised that I wasn't gonna, go serve a mission, but at that point they accepted it. So I signed up for the delayed entry program, finished out my senior year of high school. I was training up since my sophomore year. I was running and making sure I was in shape. I was a track athlete, so I would do the sprint events, and then I would run, distance, not like the events, but I would like run on my own, like, I was doing 5 miles, training the 5 mile. I was doing rucks my senior year pretty heavily, and graduated, shipped out for basic 2 weeks later.
Awesome, man. Going into the option 40 thing, was it relatively easy for you to get an option 40 lined up? How did that process go for you?
So I went to the recruiting office and I was like, hey, like this is what I want to do. They're like, oh yeah, cool. Let's go take the ASVAB. Fucking crushed the ASVAB. I fucking got a 97 or some shit. Like the overall score, and I got like a 132 or 129 GT score, a high GT score. And they were like trying to get me to do like some nerd shit. And I was like, no, like I want infantry. And they're like, they kind of looked at me funny, like, you could literally do any job in the Army. Like, why do you want to do infantry? I'm like, because I want to do infantry. Like, that's what I want to do. Like, that's your job. Like, give me the contract. And my recruiter wasn't able to get one before I went to MEPS for like the initial medical screening. So I went to MEPS, got my medical screening, and then I was working with one of the HRC people. I think pretty sure he was a civilian. And because I didn't have a contract, usually you have your contract before you go to MEPS and then you finalize it there. I went without one, and I was like, that's kind of risky because it's like you can kind of get bullied into doing something you don't want to do. So I was like, all right, I just got to hold firm. And this dude was like, yeah, we don't have any right now, but let me make a call to Kentucky or wherever the HRC command is based. And he was able to get one for me. I didn't get a bonus or nothing like that, but I didn't really care. The bonus for me was getting a guaranteed shot at RASP. So I was like, all right, hell yeah. I read through it a few times, made sure it was set option 40 on all the important papers. So you go in as an 11X, so you're not designated as a regular infantryman or like the indirect fire mortarman infantryman. So I was like, whatever, that's not something I can control. Hopefully I get lucky and I get 11 Bravo. I would not want to be an 11 Chuck like a lot of dudes worry that they're going to end up being, because it's not as sexy as just being the basic plain Jane 11 Bravo.
Yeah, I mean, you might get to drop a shit ton of mortars on a deployment, but you're probably gonna get a TBI out of that. So I can
Oh yeah, I
imagine.
mean, we'll get into that kind of stuff because they were very, very busy in Syria.
Definitely.
But that's we'll get to
A little
that.
more on the option 40 thing. I know there's a lot of dudes out there now that are going in and they're unsure if they should wait to get option 40, wait for the new fiscal year, or go in and volunteer at OSIT, volunteer at Airborne. What are your thoughts on that? I know quite a few people that are in that position right now. Either in OSIT or Airborne or about to sign up. Is there any kind of advice that you have as far as that goes?
Yeah, if you know that you want to be in Ranger Regiment, it's not worth leaving up the chance, right? Like you only get kind of one shot at getting to Ranger Regiment because it is very, from what I've heard, like I talked to a lot of dudes who are my basic training company, and they're like, yeah, I want to do Ranger eventually once I get to my unit. And no one ever did that I know of, right? So it was the only the option 40 guys that were able to do it, one. And two, at least when I went in, so I was in basic in 2015. The Ranger recruiter came by and he didn't have any contracts available. Like it was only the dudes that had their option 40s that were able to go ahead and go to RASP, go to Airborne. It was Airborne first and then RASP at the time. Um, Granted, with the current like kind of manning issues across the Army, that's probably a little bit more. It's a little bit probably a little bit easier to pick up one of those contracts while you're in, OSA or Airborne. However, it's still going to be a gamble because you don't know. Like they might have, hit their quota for option 40 dudes for that kind of time slot that you're in, and you might not be able to get one, and then you're kind of, shit out of luck, unfortunately. So my advice is what I always tell people because I get asked that all the time. It's like, hey, like there's no option 40s. It's like, cool. Like if you're not in a rush to join the Army, like you just graduated high school, you're about to graduate high school, play hardball with your recruiter. Be like, hey, I'm not going to sign up unless you get me an option 40, and they will move heaven and earth to try and get you that. As soon as they get you one, that you can bet they're going to be calling your ass, and you should be able to get it then. But that would be my advice: is don't join without having it in hand that you'll get at least a shot at going to RASP. That's my opinion. Obviously, you can get it later on, like if you decide you want to do it, like you're just a regular dude and you're like hearing about the Ranger Regiment. Obviously, yeah, you can try and get one there, but if you know the Ranger Regiment's where you want to end up, give yourself the best possible odds by getting an option 40.
And yeah, just something to note, a lot of people don't realize how open the Ranger Regiment is about recruiting. I'm not sure if it was still the case when you went through, but I mean now they have liaisons at various AIT sites. I do know that they come around in Airborne and stuff to ask people if they volunteer, but like you said, it's not a sure thing, and it's nice to get that kind of insight on it. So showing up at Benning, before you go to OSIT, anything like that, the dreaded 30th AG experience. How is that for you? Because I've heard people say that they'd rather deploy back to some of the most kinetic areas in like Afghanistan than ever have to go back to 30th AG.
Yeah, it's just a huge culture shock for the most part. There's just a ton of bodies moving around. It's your first taste of like what the military is like. And it's just jarring, and it's not very fun because there's so much stuff that they have to do to process you into the Army. You're literally just put in an assembly line, and you're like, all right, cool, you're going to stand in this line, or you're going to sit on these benches and wait for your turn to get your shots, or fill out this banking paperwork, or get more medical screening. Like it's a freaking nightmare. And I would agree with those people. I'd rather do Ranger school. Maybe I don't know. I don't know if I want to do Ranger school again over 30th AG again, but it's not a very fun experience. And it kind of leaves people wondering. It's like, oh man, because that's your first taste of it, and you're like, oh man, is the rest of the Army going to be like this? And it's definitely not the case. Like it gets significantly better after you leave 30th AG. Like I'd rather do if I had to choose between basic and 30th AG again, I'd choose going through basic again versus sitting through the hell that is 30th AG.
So just skimming past OSIT and stuff like that. Just in general, if you want to touch on your TRADOC experience at all, or if you just want to get into pre-RASP and RASP, I'm assuming they had you do the 14-week cycle.
Yeah, it was the 14-week cycle. They hadn't changed it to the longer one at that point. I think that happened like in 2017 or 2018. If I remember correctly. But I actually kind of enjoyed basic training. I was like, hell yeah, I'm in the Army. This is fun. It was like a Boy Scout camp because I was a scout growing up. I got my Eagle Scout, and I was like, hey, this is like scout camp on fucking cocaine. I love it. I had a good time. I was my last name being Allred. I was like the first on the roster for the entire company, and then first on the roster of my platoon. And the drill sergeants know who's got what kind of contracts, right? They know who's got Airborne, who's got Ranger. And very early on, my kind of drill sergeants identified me as like someone that they were going to try and put in charge of the platoon, like during the later phases of basic training. And again, coming from a Mormon kind of background and upbringing, like I hadn't been around a whole lot of people that weren't LDS or like weren't Mormon. So dealing with those kind of dudes that were a little bit more rowdy is like kind of, what's the word for it? I keep saying culture shock, but maybe that's not the right term. It was just a new experience, and I had to learn how to navigate, interpersonal relationships with other grown ass men who didn't have the same values as I did necessarily. So I struggled a little bit. Like I would kind of try to be a rule follower and try and make sure the platoon was doing what they were supposed to be doing. And I, looking back, I should have realized, hey, they're going to do what they're going to do, kind of thing. But I had really good drill instructors. I remember my senior drill instructor, Tyree, was a 82nd guy. Got in some pretty gnarly shit in Afghanistan. We had a drill sergeant Lockwood, who was a 101st dude. This dude was great, but he definitely had some demons he was fighting. And you could kind of see it in his eyes. Very quiet, reserved guy, but would absolutely just fucking destroy the platoon if we fucked up at all. But I really enjoyed basic training. I had a good time. I was the top shot for our platoon, and then I was the honor graduate as well, which was pretty dope. So I had a good experience there. Had a good experience in airborne school. That's when you kind of get your first taste of freedom, at least how it worked back then. Was the airborne honor graduate for my company as well, and went on to RASP, and that was where shit got real.
Oh yeah, so showing up at RASP, like if you want to speak about the instructors real quick, you don't have to mention them by name or rank or anything, but if you knew anything about them or their backgrounds coming in.
Yeah, so I don't remember a whole lot of like the names of the instructors, and I can talk about two of the ones because I think that they're either done with their careers in the military. So we had Sergeant Block as a kind of guest instructor. He wasn't full-time RASP cadre. But if you look up Sergeant Block, he was a 375 guy who was wounded in action on an objective. I think it was Objective Aries, if I remember correctly. Let me hit some Googling. But it basically was a completely fucked objective where there was a bunch of buried IEDs. I can't. Don't quote me on Objective Aries.
You're
I can't remember
absolutely
the name
right.
of the mission.
It is Objective
Is
Aries.
it that one?
Yeah,
Okay,
it was in Kandahar in late 2013. I'm somewhat familiar with what you're talking about.
Yeah.
No,
So he was on
imagine.
that objective, and he came out for our Cole Range, and was cadre for us at Cole Range. He didn't really fuck with us like physically. It was like towards the end. I think it was like the last night or the second to last night. We'd finished our land nav, and it was just him out there. Like all the other cadre went home, and it was just Sergeant Block with his prosthetic eye. I think he had the Captain America shield in it, which was really cool. And obviously, being in RASP, like you're looking up to these guys because they're all fucking legends of their own right. I didn't really know his story at that point. I kind of knew a little bit about him, but I didn't know obviously the whole details of the mission or nothing that he was on where he got wounded. But I remember we had finished night land nav, and gave us a nice solid time hack for chow. Like we were able to enjoy our MREs that night. And then he had us in open ranks formation, standing at attention for I don't know how fucking long, but we're standing at attention. And I was a winter class, so it was like December, early December. I think it was my birthday that night, or the next day. I can't remember which one, but he had us in open ranks and was just going around and inspecting everyone's uniforms. And he was silent, like you wouldn't hear him. And if anyone turned their head, we knew we were going to be hitting the wood line. So everyone was just standing at attention. I remember starting to hallucinate, and I thought there was a fucking alligator or a crocodile walking around in the ranks behind us, just due to the leaves on the ground and stuff, and then just hearing him walking around. And that was a very interesting experience. Cole Range was definitely interesting. Obviously, you're hitting the wood line. They have this big pit of sandbags that you get told to reconstruct and to move around the little area that you're in. And the land nav part, I enjoyed land nav. Like I'm pretty good at it. So I was like, all right, here's my little respite away from fucking doing push-ups and squats and holding my ruck over my head and hitting the wood line. And land nav wasn't an issue for me. There was definitely a few points that gave me some struggles, but somehow it worked out. I felt like I had a little bit of maybe divine intervention on some of them, where it's just like I had no idea how I found this point. And then the rest of it, it was solid. So we had a holiday block leave, which split phase 1 and phase 2. in half. And I had a girlfriend at the time. She was a little bit older than me, and she was in college, and she fucking dumped me over the course of holiday block leave. So I came back to phase two. Like, it was my first like real girlfriend. I was fucking, completely heartbroken. And that kind of made it a little bit of a struggle. Um, but phase two is where you get to do all the cool shit. Shooting, you get to learn how to make explosives, how to build charges, how to breach doors. And that's when they start kind of treating you, and they're like more mentoring you than fucking you down. Like phase one, like everyone will say, is like where it's like the test. It's like, all right, we're gonna see who can cut it here. And then the next phase, they realize, hey, this guy could be deployed in a couple months. Like, we should probably teach him how to shoot. So it turns more into a mentoring thing. Obviously, if you guys are a tough class, like, they're going to continue to screw with you guys. But my class was really solid. Like, we were all of the right mindset. We all wanted to be there. And graduated, I think it was January 26th or 27th of 2016. And we got our battalion assignments. I was still going through this breakup. I remember talking to one of my buddies who went through basic and had the option 40. And he was going, I think, to second or third, and I was going to first. And he's like, dude, first bat, that's fucking awesome. He's like, I had no idea. I knew nothing about Savannah at this point. Like, I just knew it was like kind of on the coast. He's like, dude, there's like sororities out there where they like have to screw rangers to get into the sorority, and they have to like earn their ranger panties and shit. I'm like, oh, that doesn't sound too bad, coming off of a heartbreak. So I was like, oh, cool. Let's go see what that's about. And showed up to ACO 175. And it was like right at the start of the training cycle. So my first training event was MLAT, which was a good time. It was a learning experience, but I'll stop there. I'm sure you got questions about
yeah, definitely,
about RASP or stuff.
Real quick, showing up, how disappointed were you to find out that SCAD doesn't have sororities?
I know, I had no idea, and I was like, wait, I got bamboozled. But I mean, at that point, I didn't really care. I was like, we were in the middle of the training cycle. I didn't really have a whole lot of desire to go out and try and find girls, and I was underage at the time too, so I didn't want to screw with trying to get a fake or sneak into bars or nothing. I was still kind of not drinking a whole lot because I was raised LDS, so I was like, I don't see the whole allure of this, like, whatever. But yeah, I was a little sad. But whatever.
Going back to RASP a little bit, it is definitely interesting how certain instructors or cadres have a aura around them, or kind of rumors get whispered around the type of objectives they're on and stuff. I know Dylan talked about having on, I'm blanking on his name, but it's a pretty well known RRC guy.
Okay.
Former 3-7. I want to say it's Mike Edwards. And yeah, you would talk about how Mike Edwards would make the entire class go into the woods and grab a stick and have him come back up and be like, no, that's not the stick I'm looking for.
That's not the stick. Yep, that's a classic. I'm thinking of a stick. Go and find it for me.
So yeah, showing up. I know you said that you showed up during MLAT. Showing up to 175. Talk to me about that first day. Walking into the cage or the cough at ACO, meeting either your team leader, your squad leader, whoever you met first. How was that?
Yeah, it was actually pretty chill because they were out on an F&P that night. So I showed up. There was no one around battalion headquarters. Like, everyone had gone home for the day or was out on a training event. So I got linked in with the training room dudes, the training room NCO and his like runner dude. And they're like, yeah, we don't know what platoon you're going to be going to yet, but here's the cough, and we give you a tour of the cough. And they were very nice and friendly. And then the next day, I think I showed up. Like normal. It was a later work call because they were out all night. So it was like a noonish work call, if I remember, like a 9 o'clock work call. And I remember just standing like outside the office. I was the only one that went to my company for my batch of dudes that went to RASP. I went to RASP with. Most of them went to B or CCO. I was the only ACO guy. And I was like just standing outside the training room. I kind of flew under the radar because usually there's like a horde of new guys. When you get new guys, it's like 3 or 4 or 5 of them. So it's easy to tell that they're new because they're just kind of standing awkwardly in the hallways. So I kind of was sitting inside the training room. And then I was like, all right, you're going to 3 Alpha, you're going to first squad. And showed up, and the team leader, one of the team leaders at the time, was doing BRC. So he was gone. And the team leader that I got was this really solid dude. I'm not going to say his name; he's still in, but was this kind of skinnier, like a very German dude. Um, and he was like, all right. He treated me like a grown ass adult from the kind of the get go. Like I had all my paperwork squared away, like I was on time. I remember getting dropped the first time for push-ups, and I had got my knowledge packet luckily the night before, showing up. So I like studied it and made sure I knew like the Airborne Rangers in the sky for our company. Dropped maybe do push-ups, and I hit my Airborne Rangers in the sky, and recovered. And he was like, all right, that good thing. Good thing you knew that. And then from then, my first tab was a dude from Columbus, Georgia, funnily enough. Just this rowdy Southern kid. And the whole squad was really solid. We had a very senior private. I think he finished his career in regiment as a private, but had been on a deployment, at least one deployment. And between him and the other private we had, they squared me away. They made sure I was solid. And then they didn't really have time to screw with me. They're like, all right, we're going to teach you kind of your job. You're going to be a grenadier. You're going to carry the litter. Here's how you do this. Here's how you do that. Like, don't fuck up. And we went right into the MLAT like the next week or like the week after that I showed up, and proved myself on that. Like I did everything to the best of my ability. Obviously there was a few little things here and there that I was still learning, but ultimately I wasn't a complete hindrance to them right away, which kind of saved me honestly from a lot of the fuck games that normally privates get exposed to. So it really just depends on your squad and platoon culture to whether or not you're going to get messed with super heavily, and obviously your own temperament and your ability to learn. Like that was the biggest thing. Was I was a quick learner. I picked things up. I knew my weapon systems. I'm kind of a nerd about that shit anyway. So I was like, all right, I get to learn about guns and memorize things about guns. This is great. But it was good. Like showing up, and then we did TFT up in Dahlonega, Georgia. So I got to experience mountain phase before I even showed up to Ranger School. Live fires, we did squad live fires, CQB shoot house, all this stuff. And I just continued to show up and work hard to be good at my job so I wouldn't get screwed with, and it worked pretty well.
So at this point, what understanding did you have of the dreaded RFS process? I know the saying goes that the hardest part about regiment isn't getting there; it's staying in. Was that ever something you were worried about personally?
No, I wasn't. I was like, I know I can perform PT wise. Like, I wasn't like a freaking absolute stud, but I could exceed the standard. I would always come in under the run times pretty well and under the 3 hour ruck time. And, I could pass the PT test. I could pass the RPAT fine. Kind of middle of the road physically. But I knew I wasn't going to get into trouble downtown. I was like, I'm not going out and underage drinking. Like, I'm not going to do that. I might go drink at a buddy's house. Like I did do that a few times. I drank in the barracks. But I knew that's like the biggest career killer, because that's what everyone would say in RASP. Like, hey, alcohol, watch out for it. I was like, all right, cool. I'm not touching it till I'm 21, because it'd be a really easy RFS packet for me if I was, got into some shenanigans downtown with the other privates and got caught up or something. So there was, I think at this point there was like a senior, like a squad leader or so that had just been RFS from 175, who had shown up at RASP to be a cadre there. Or I guess he wasn't RFS, but he did have an alcohol related incident and they decided not to RFS him. And I think he ended up in RASP, or maybe it was Ranger School that I was thinking of. No, yeah, he got sent to Ranger School, but I remember hearing the story about that. And I was like, oh yeah, it's real. Like I'm not gonna screw with it. I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna keep my head down and keep working and try not to get into trouble. So it was a concern.
I got you.
But
I imagine they send a certain contingent of dudes to eco too that maybe aren't getting RFS.
Yeah, it just depends on kind of what the battalion kind of needs and kind of the severity of whatever infraction you incurred. Or my biggest concern was honestly not passing Ranger School. I was like, dreaded 48 club on the push-ups, or some stupid stuff that would happen, stuff that does happen at Ranger School, because it's like, hey, like if you don't pass Ranger School, like that's when you can get RFS. So I was more worried about that more so than anything. But yeah, I've had a few friends that like kind of screwed up on the line, like maybe ND'd like on a training event with a blank or something, and wouldn't necessarily kick him out or kick him to RFS, and they'd be like, hey, you got like a year and a half left on your contract, maybe 2 years left, and it's like by the time you get out processed, by the time the RFS paperwork is complete, which can take like a few months, up to 6 months, I think, in some cases. By the time you get in process of your new unit, like it wouldn't be a service to you or that new unit to kind of uproot you like that. So there are some cases of dudes that would get sent to eco. It really just depends on a few factors, but.
So going into the training cycle and up to your first deployment, a lot of people don't know that, like we were talking about earlier a little bit, that the Ranger Regiment has a very set, predetermined deployment cycle. You can correct me on this, but I believe it's about 4 months deployed, 2 weeks of leave, and then I believe 7 months of training cycle again, and then repeat.
Yeah, more or less. So it's like it's staggered in such a way that you won't always deploy at the same time every year. So like for us, my first deployment, we were slotted, and during the training cycle, when I first showed up, I talked to the company commander. He wanted to talk to me. He's like, "Hey, like we're slotted for Team BAF this summer, so freaking get ready, get your mind right, train up because you're going to war." And I was like, "Well, hell yeah, that's what I wanted to do." So that was our first slotted one. I think it was like June or July of 16. And we finished a company live fire, and they were like, all right, ACO 3 Alpha, you guys are staying home. And then the other 2 platoons were going to Camp Scorpion. They gave Team BAF, I think, to BCO that year because it kind of depends on platoon or the company's performance as a whole as to what they get allocated to. And they try to keep it fair. They try to rotate it through. But obviously you want to send the most capable platoon to the most action areas. So, but yeah, no, there is a rotation. It is very much set in stone. Of you kind of know exactly when you're going to be going, more or less, at least the month, if not like the week or the day. At least when I was in it, kind of now because it's drawn down so much, it's not a guaranteed thing. It's just another part of the component cycle, where it's like, oh, we could be deployed, but we're not. We're going to go and do, out of country training or go do work with a NATO partner for a couple weeks and then come back. And then we're just going to be doing schools or more training events. So it's kind of a never ending training cycle for the dudes right now, unless they get lucky to get on one of the few OIR deployments that are still out there.
So previously we had on Derek, who's a Marine Raider, and
Mm-hmm.
he actually deployed with Team BAF in 2019 as a Raider element. I'm not sure if that program was there when you deployed. If you want to speak to a little bit why Team BAF is so coveted and why Rangers at that time frame wanted that deployment, and I believe this is, you said July 2016. So is this pre Green Sword or post Green Sword? And if you want to go into that a little bit as well.
Yeah, I don't know how much of the stuff there is about Green Sword out there, but I can kind of speak on, without talking a whole lot of shit. So it was like Green Sword was 375 mission in Nangarhar. And we were on rear D or like right about to deploy when that kind of stuff went down. Or maybe we had already deployed and like they had kept a team in country. I don't remember because it seemed like it was further into the summer after the rest of the dudes had left. Because I remember one morning, on rear D, one of the corporals, one of the gun team leaders, took us on a freaking absolute just death run in the early Georgia humidity and heat, and just freaking ran us into the ground, and then brought us to the memorial where he smoked us more. He's like, "Hey, you guys are tracking. There's like a bunch of 375 guys that are getting fucked up overseas right now in the heat, and they're heat catting, and you guys need to be fucking stronger because there's a chance we go and do something like that." And I was like, "Okay, cool, whatever." And later on in September, we got blown out for Green Sword 2. They're like, "Hey, 3 Alpha, you guys need to come forward." So that was my first deployment. Was technically a blowout. We kind of knew beforehand, like we had a good enough, fair warning system that they're like, they needed to bring us forward. And so yeah, we got in country. We were at BAF, and we were getting ready to do that. We went to Scorpion for like a couple weeks to be with the company. And then we were starting to plan for Green Sword 2, and then I can't remember his name. I should know it, but there was a Green Beret that he stepped on an IED during some of the initial phases of the operation, and they kind of canked it for us, which is disappointing because our objective was going to be fucking rowdy. It was supposed to be some arms bazaar, some shit in Nangarhar, and we had a new private at this time in my squad, and it was kind of between me and him who was going to be on like the support element, who's going to be part of the clearance team. And since I was a little bit more senior than him, they're like, yeah, Allred, you're gonna come with us on the clearance team. It's going to be rowdy. It's going to be like 2-man clears. We're going to be fragging a bunch of houses. And I was like, fuck yeah, let's do it. And then it all got kinked. We spent a couple more weeks there, and then we rotated out ahead of the main body. So first deployment, short, kind of nothing really happened, which is, you'll see, is kind of the theme for 3 Alpha is we kind of joked around and said that we were cursed because we never got to do any fucking really cool badass missions or get to be Team BAF.
Well, I mean, that's sort of the cool part about it, right? Is where, the general perception of the Ranger Regiment is this elite direct action raid force, which they absolutely are. But like I said earlier, a lot of people don't know about the specific kind of like FID missions they were doing in Syria, or the type of programs they were running over there. Even with like the Ansoff teams, we don't have to get too much into that because, like you said, I'm not sure what's actually out there, like open source about it. But yeah, definitely. So coming back from that deployment, did you go to Ranger School directly after that?
Pretty directly after that. I realized I didn't answer your question. So Team BAF was like the main strike force in Afghanistan. They were the ones going out and doing like the sensitive missions because there wasn't any tier 1 assets in the country at that scale that could execute like a huge, like large scale clearances, like training camp clearances, or point raids, which is what what Team BAF was doing primarily. They would, get intel on some shithead somewhere in a compound, watch the compound for a few days, and then they'd be like, all right, cool, you guys are greenlit for this target. And that's when the planning process would start, and then they'd go out and hit it and come back. And it was very much very focused. It was like you were going out and you were living at the flagpole in BAF, on Camp Alpha, and you have a bunch of you have some SF teams running around, you have joint, you have some Brits running around, some Canadians, all doing kind of cool stuff. But you guys were like the dudes they were going to call when they fucking found someone that they really needed to go and either capture or kill. So it was very much, those were very kinetic. When you went to Team BAF, it was going to be very much a kinetic kind of deployment. And then going on here, so we got back, we started another training cycle. We went on leave, next training cycle started, and at this point I did go to Ranger School in the spring of 2017. Passed the PT test. They were like, yep, it's time for you to go. So I went with the other private in my squad, went to CERT together, and went to Ranger School. I think our first date was, the first day of Ranger School was like in early May of 17. He ended up failing push-ups or getting screwed on push-ups, which is bullshit because he was fucking better at push-ups than I was. So that's how I knew it's kind of rigged to a degree. And then recycled Darby, went through Darby, recycled Darby. I had Devin Kuhn in my squad, a 275 Ranger who was killed in training. I made friends with him in CERT, and then in Ranger School, he was my squad. We were the only Rangers in a pretty officer-centric squad, so we kind of had to stick together. Recycled Darby for patrols was a pretty quick turnaround, and then the next phase of Darby that I went through, I was ACO, and my buddy who failed push-ups came back and was in my company for that one, which was awesome because it's nice having someone you kind of know. Even though you do make new friends in Ranger School, but it was cool. It's like, all right, cool, we're doing this together kind of thing. Let's get our tabs together. And at this point, our platoon was training up to be part of a strike force out of Iraq, working with a tier 1 unit. And we were both like, all right, if we go straight through, we can make it on this deployment and we can go catch, the tail end, the last couple months of this deployment. So that was the goal. Made it through mountains first try, and then Florida is where kind of fell apart. I ended up recycling Florida twice. Failed patrols the first time. Second time I failed patrols. Had to go to the brigade board at Benning. They drove me back. I went up on the bus with all the freaking guys that were graduating. I'm just freaking like, shit, dude, this is it. Like, I could be failing Ranger School and I'm gonna get kicked out of Ranger Regiment. Like, I was like, fuck, this is it. Like, hopefully they liked me enough to let me stay. I was like, I'll take a day one if I need to, but hopefully I don't have to do that. Showed up at the battalion board or the brigade board at Benning at the RTB headquarters, and the I can't remember if it was the battalion commander or the battalion sergeant major or brigade sergeant major rather that was a former bat boy, but one of the dudes knew how important it was that I fucking pass, because they're like, all right, this guy's gonna get kicked out if he doesn't fucking pass. So they're like, how does I had good peers, which is what saved me. It was I peered very well. In all my phases. So like, all right, this guy's not a shitbag, something just happened, whatever. And they reinserted me back into Florida, which was, moment of elation up until I had to do it all again for the third time. Ended up getting my go on my very last look. I was almost fully accepting that I wasn't going to pass at this point, failed my first look. And then we got pulled out of the field due to a hurricane. So we lost a whole day of patrols. And at that point, our platoon had like 2 goes. And we were like on day 6 of the FTX. And I was like, dear God, I definitely know that I'm not one of those 2 goes. But was able to clutch up. We had a really solid leadership team that day that I got my second look. And it was honestly like the best patrol we had done that far into the into Florida phase. And I was the security squad leader for that one, and it was like the long walk day. So I kind of knew, because I had been there already. I knew what routes we were going to do. I knew kind of where the objectives were. I was like, all right, it's do or die at this point. And we pulled it out. It was me and another bat boy that I went to cert with who'd caught up to me at this point, because he recycled Darby again. And he caught up to me, and we got our goes together. And I remember the RI grading us, and he's like, you guys are good. I don't think you guys got to worry about anything. And this was before they would tell you if you got to go or a no-go. So they kind of left it up for you to think about. But when they gave us a group AR, I was like, yep, all right, we're good. Like, the mission went well. Patrol base went well at night. Like, I got my go. So that was awesome. Unfortunately, missed the 2017 deployment, but oh well.
All in all, how long did you spend at Ranger School?
Oh, if I had my notebook on hand, I could give you an exact count of the days, but I think between CERT and Ranger School, because I kind of counted CERT as part of that, I wanted to say I started in April of 17. It was like April 1st when I showed up to CERT, and I graduated September 22nd. So I think that's like freaking almost 6 months. 6 months either in CERT or Ranger School. Obviously, Ranger School being the longer of the two.
So this is more of a strategic question, I guess, for lack of a better term. But how do you feel about the relevancy of Ranger School in 2024 going forward for the regiment? I know it's one of those things where you have to get your tab, and it's not very negotiable, especially if you're 11 Bravo, 13 Fox, that kind of thing. But how do you feel about that personally?
I think it's still relevant. Light infantry tasks, as we're kind of seeing in Ukraine, where it's like, hey, like, you're not, maybe the Rangers are going to have to start going back to more that long range patrol style, where you are going out and living out of your rucksack for, days at a time. You look at the LERPs of Vietnam, you look at what happened in Korea, like they were out and living off the land or getting like aerial resupplies. It's still very much I think needed. Could it be updated a little bit with, modern tech of like drones and stuff, or like dealing with how to counter thermal, how to counter drones? Yeah, but like that's what training at your actual unit should be for. Like, you learn the basics at Ranger School, and then you kind of basics like long range patrolling and doing that kind of light infantry tasks, and then you kind of bring that back to your unit. I mean, if you're not a light infantry dude, like, you still, it's more so a leadership school than it is like a tactics kind of school, right? It's mostly to see how are you going to perform when you fucking haven't slept in 2 days, you haven't eaten very much, and it's fucking a billion degrees out in the Florida sun. Like, how are you going to react as an individual when it comes down to these crazy stressors? How well are you going to be able to motivate your team, which is, applies across the board. Like, just because warfare is evolving and changing doesn't take away the fact that shit fucking sucks, and it's very hard to be an effective leader. So it's more of it's you learn more about yourself than you do anything else. Because yeah, a lot of the tactics, they're Vietnam era tactics, and it's kind of like you're almost LARPing in a way, but they're able to do it in a very controlled environment and give you specific objectives. And yeah, you do learn a little bit of, if you're a soft skill MOS, yeah, you will learn some pretty good infantry stuff. It's a very good school for that as well. But the main goal of the school is to see who you are as a person. It's to really strip away all that shit of, oh, I got, 6 hours, 8 hours of sleep last night and 3 meals, and I hit the gym. I'm well hydrated, and now we got to do this mission. Versus I didn't sleep. I've had water, because that's something I do care about there. And I haven't eaten, and my guys are fucking falling asleep on me while they're walking. How do I deal with it then? And how do I still get to the mission? How do I navigate through terrain? How do I get to the end mission with as efficiently as possible while completing the commander's objectives?
So graduating Ranger School, getting tabbed out, and returning to your squad. What was the dynamic like coming back in? Now
It was
as a
good.
tab.
It was good. My buddy, that he passed Florida phase, so he ended up getting to go back and deploy. So he'd been back for a little bit. He got a couple more months of deployment than I do. Um, but it was good. We got a fresh batch of. This is when I met my buddy Joe Van Heel. He was the first private that we got when I showed up. He showed up in October after we kind of got back from leave. So he was kind of like the first dude that I had. I wasn't necessarily like his team leader or nothing, but I was kind of put in charge of him. They're like, "Hey, square this guy away," because we didn't have any other privates in the squad at that point. There were the other two that were in the squad by the time that I had come back from school had gotten. One of them got RFS because he couldn't pass a 5 mile, and the other one, like he went on that deployment, but he kind of like fucked up on that deployment, so he didn't stick around for much longer. I think they moved him to the mailroom or some shit, if I remember correctly. He just wasn't cut out for it. He's kind of, for lack of a better word, kind of a bitch, kind of a soft dude, which sucks to suck, I guess, but that's how it is. So we didn't have any privates, and we finally got our first private. And Joe was solid. I was glad to have gotten in my squad. Solid physically. He was kind of dumb when he first showed up, and I've got plenty of podcasts talking about that. But he was a quick learner, and he was willing to freaking put in the freaking hard work. So you do get treated like more of an adult, because I did have a decent amount of private time. Like I knew my job, I knew the jobs of the dudes above me. And yeah, we rolled into the next training cycle, and then we were training up for Syria in 2018.
What kind of billet did they put you in after coming back from Ranger School? Were you just a saw gunner, or what was that
Yep.
like?
Yep. So I was a saw gunner. So we had the two team leaders, our squad leader, and then the other tab, my buddy, who's the other saw gunner, and then we had the kid. We had Joe. That was our team. That was our squad. We were a pretty light squad at that point. They had just dissolved DECO. I want to say it was like later in 2016 that they dissolved DECO. So they had a huge influx of dudes, and that's when they really kind of started harping on standards. And a bunch of dudes ended up getting RFS because they couldn't hack it, or couldn't meet the standard for whatever reason, which is wild to me. So we kind of went through a little bit of a culling phase, and so the squads and the platoons were kind of a little bit light. I'm sorry, what was that? I don't know if that answered your question or not.
No, no, you're totally good. I was just trying to get a sense of what your role within the squad
Oh
was.
yeah. So I was a saw gunner. Sorry.
All good. All good.
Yep, saw gunner. So I started learning that. Got a little bit of experience on a little bit more so in Ranger School, because it's like you shoot it in basic, and then you'll get a familiarization class, or you'll get to shoot it at the range in regiment. But you really start to learn how that machine and that gun works. Once you get assigned that role, which I really liked. I liked being a saw gunner. It was a good time. I freaking love that shit. Carrying a machine gun's always a good time for the most part.
Yeah, man. So going into Syria, as as broad as you want to be, can you talk a bit about what your platoon was doing there operationally, what it was like, kind of the AO, and if you guys were out there on your own or if you were attached to someone else? How did that deployment work out?
So kind of leading up to this, we knew that we were going to Syria, so we were like, all right, cool. We got to, work on mobility training, work on, being capable with strikers, because that's what they were driving around Syria at the time. And we had heard, they were just getting it in 2017. Like a lot of our dudes would go over into Syria from Iraq to help out with CCPs and stuff. Like they just needed extra hands during the push to Raqqa. I remember one of the guys in my platoon had this video of him. They were helping these civilians that had been injured in the fighting, and there was one dude that had to amputate his leg, and he had this video of this guy he was sawing his leg off, like just kind of wild shit that you don't really get to do, just because there's not a huge U.S. footprint in the region. So it was like kind of all hands on deck. Even though he was a ranger, he was helping out surgeons and stuff, doing like minor medical tasks. So going into Syria, we knew that the push into Raqqa was pretty much complete. It was pretty stable in the region, so we were like not super worried. However, right before we went, and I think it was February of 2018, was when the Wagner Group had that run-in with U.S. forces.
Battle of Khasham.
Yep. And so we were like, oh shit, like we got to be prepared to go fight fucking Russian mercenaries if that happens again. So they're like, all right, we're going to take out all the freaking, heavy weaponry out of the arms room, all the Mark 19s, all the Mark 47s, the 50 cals, all the good shit, make sure we take clues for the javelins, because they used a bunch of javelins to kill those tanks. And that was kind of what we were like, worst case scenario was like, all right, we got to go down to the Flot from northern Syria down to southern Syria, or, more south, and engage Russian PMCs. Kind of in the side to that, like I was able to kind of hear from some friends and some sources on the Russian side that it was a complete miscommunication between their chain of command. They had shitty comms, or like their high command didn't know that there was Americans in the area that they were pushing into, and they just kept pushing. And that's why we had to freaking ultimately attack them, because we tried to establish comms with them. Because when you're in Syria, it's like, yeah, we understand there's Russian forces there, but it's like, we're not going to try and fight each other if we don't have to. But it was a simple kind of miscommunication at the end of the day, where we didn't have comms with the Russian element that was moving on the Flot, and then their chain of command didn't understand that there was Americans there, so they would not have sent Russians to where the Americans were. Like they know better. We know very much to kind of stay out of each other's way when we're in Syria, kind of do our own thing in whatever regions we're in, and to not step on each other's toes. So there was kind of an anomaly, and it turns out it was mostly an accident, which is unfortunate. It's kind of cool that we got to engage in kind of that anti-tank warfare for a second, but it just kind of sucks at the end of the day, because they really shouldn't have been in that area, and they shouldn't have been moving on Americans. It was just shitty intel that kind of brought them to their demise, unfortunately. Which obviously we have our opinions about Russia right now, but it's war, and it's like shit does happen in war, and it's kind of unfortunate that happened the way that it did. But
yeah, I can imagine.
So that was kind of. Go ahead.
I can imagine the deconfliction lines must have been pretty robust, and I mean, like you said, at the end of the day, man, they're there to kill ISIS just like you guys were. You know what I mean? So I totally get that aspect of it. And the thing about Syria was it's just such a dynamic environment with the regime,
so many
elements,
factions.
yeah, the pro-Iranian forces, stuff like that. Are you able to talk a little bit about where you were based out of at all?
I can't say exactly.
I got you.
We were in northern Syria. I can say where part of the platoon was, because we don't occupy that area anymore. But we had a significant force in Kobani, at the LCF, the Lafarge cement factory, which I think has been reclaimed by Turkey. But at this point, I think we blew it the fuck up before we left. But so part of the platoon is there. So the platoon is split. We are in another area of northern Syria. And kind of our mission set was obviously kind of be a QRF for the Flot for Americans down there. And then we were running kind of missions with some three-letter agencies. And then we were also training the local Syrian Defense Forces, kind of their more elite team. So that was like the primary mission was training those guys up and making sure that they were ready to go. We were with the Tier 1 element at that time as well. And the goal was to, obviously support them when they took the partner force out on raids against ISIS targets.
Yeah, going off on a tangent as we, love to do here. I think
Yeah.
one of the major overlooked aspects of the GWAT were the partner forces. So you said you worked with the SDF on this deployment. I imagine on your earlier Afghan or later Afghan deployments, you must have worked with the Kteh Khas, the KKA.
hmm
Real quick, if you want to talk about, how you found working with these partner forces, if they were, competent, if they weren't, and just sort of some of the differences, specifically, the SDF and KKA.
Okay. Yeah. So I've worked with SDF, KKA, and then the I'm not going to say who they are in Iraq, but a pretty solid unit in Iraq. And I might have talked about it on another podcast of mine, but I'm not 100% sure. So I don't want
I
to
feel like I
kind of
know what you're
talk about it.
referring to, but yeah, we can keep that
Yeah,
vague.
we can. I mean, if you want, you and I can talk about it offline here in a minute. But um, out of the three partner forces in those three countries I worked with, the partner force we worked with in Iraq was by far the best. Number one, because they had only been trained by either Delta or Rangers. It was very consistent training. Um, it didn't keep getting changed up. Like ODAs will rotate out, and each ODA is going to have the kind of their own way of doing things. With Rangers, like it's going to be very much the same shit. We're going to teach them the fundamentals. We know how to run ranges very well. Um, and they got to be very good. And they were also very well funded, both from obviously JSOC funds or just their own internal funding in that country. And the dudes that ran that unit have were pretty well off financially, so they were able to afford some. They had Daniel Defense M4s, they had fucking dual tubes, they had knockoff cry uniforms. Some of them were legit cry uniforms. And then they actually fucking performed very well. They had their own selection course, which looked pretty fucking grueling from what the parts that I saw. As grueling as as it could be. Maybe not as hard as a first world selection course would be, but still very difficult. The SDF partner force was interesting. The only requirement to get into that unit, I think, was like kind of knew someone, and then you had to be injured in the fight against ISIS. Like there wasn't a whole lot of other selection besides that. So they had some really solid people, men and women. It was a kind of a group. So there's women in this unit. Usually you have the YPG and the YPJ, and they kind of do their own things with their own units, kind of segregated to a degree. But this unit was kind of combined, male and female, or I guess co-ed, or what's the other term for that? Doesn't really matter. There were some really solid people in that one. They were pretty capable under night vision. However, there were some that were legit like kind of rock eaters. Like it was like not even like, not to be like rude or nothing, but there was some of them that were legitimately like physically or mentally rather handicapped, which was kind of concerning because it's like you got to keep an eye on them, make sure they're not going to do something dumb, and probably not legitimately retarded or anything like that, but just not very smart. Kind of not the most IQ. And then the Kteh Khas worked with them in 2019 mostly, in Helmand, and they were pretty solid. Very kind of proud and honorable. I mean, the Afghan people in general are kind of very honorable people for the most part. But these guys were very much about fighting the Taliban and fucking ISIS and shit, specifically ISIS. Because at that point, I think by 2020, we kind of had negotiated a ceasefire with Taliban, and we weren't trying to hit them. So, but out of the three, I'd probably rank them as the Iraq force we worked with is number one, Kteh Khas is two, and then the SDF group we worked with is three.
Yeah, we always like to touch on that because the narrative around a lot of these partner force units comes from, and not begrudging them at all, but it comes from conventional dudes that mainly got partnered with your average ANA platoon, which might have been full of
Trash.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
potheads and stuff.
Spies and yeah.
100%. But yeah, a lot of people don't get that there were definitely partner force units that fought hard, and they might have varied in their capabilities and their effectiveness. But if these units are going to be partnered up with SOCOM units or JSOC units, they're going to be put through some sort of screening, I imagine, to be able to go out there and work with you guys. That helmet
hmm
deployment, we'd love to get into that. So after you come back from Syria, how's that next training cycle, and what are you hearing up to that lead up to that Camp Dwyer deployment? Because correct me if I'm wrong, but was it like a spin up, or was it a pre-planned deployment? How did that work?
No, like came back from Syria, did 5 months there. Again, it was a really unique deployment. I'll just touch on a few more things really quick about Syria that I enjoyed.
Yeah, please.
We got to drive around in the city. We got to drive between the two bases we were at. I got to see a lot of the countryside. Got to roll around in plain clothes with my fucking saw on my lap, driving through a city on an up armored Land Cruiser. Like you got to do. It was a very much a non-traditional Ranger deployment. This is kind of what I think you were wanting to get at. Like we were doing PSDs for interrogators that were going places. We were doing PSDs for other kind of intelligence agencies and stuff that were out there, doing whatever they do, doing spook shit. But they're like, hey, we want a team of 4 Rangers to come with us and go. We're going to this city for a little bit, or we're going out into the city for this reason. We need you guys to come with. And we would roll. Plain clothes, slick, no kit. Like kits would be in the back of the vehicle, and then we'd have our Glocks and then a rifle, like kind of with us, which was cool shit. Like we got to grow our beards out. Typically, it's only the AMSOC dudes that would get to do that. So they're like, yeah, you guys are working with tier 1, and you guys are in a country like we don't want you screaming, "There's Rangers here," kind of thing. Where even though it's like you see a bearded American, everyone kind of assumes, oh, now they know it's like that's special operations, right? So, or something, but it's harder to tell, because all the dudes that are non-traditional are going to be rocking civilians and beards, so you can't really tell who exactly they're with. But it's like, all right, these guys are wearing civilians, but they don't have beards. It's like, oh, that's like our blue book is fucking visible on the internet and shit. It's like it's pretty easy to kind of figure out people who they or what units are which, kind of based on what they're doing, even though you're not necessarily wearing a uniform. So that was a really really cool experience.
Yeah, so you're telling me all these white guys with beards and tattoos, they aren't Syrians?
They're not. These guys aren't Syrians. What? That's crazy. There was one dude we had in our platoon. He was one of the mortar guys that was with us in Syria, but he looked like if he got some indigenous clothing, he would definitely pass as a local, which was kind of cool. But I digress. It was really cool. Got to have a lot of local food. Got to experience that. We wore. There's a couple times where we wore SDF uniforms, which was kind of cool. I don't think they're really doing that much anymore. But yeah, really unique trip. Very non-traditional Ranger deployment at this point. We didn't get in anything kinetic. There was a few points where you're kind of worried about getting tailed in the city or some kind of stuff happening. But we did a few QRF missions. The closest we got on that deployment, I guess, was there's one point where ISR was watching this vehicle that was going to go to this house, and so they're waiting for it to get to the house. But it turns out they were following our QRF little convoy in the Panders, and so ISR was like, "Hey, fucking get up ahead of this. Like, put a couple miles of distance between you and this vehicle, and if it's going to keep going on this road, we're just going to have you guys do a vehicle interdiction. Kind of like almost an ambush. Obviously, we're not trying to kill them; we're trying to capture them. But they're like, you guys need to freaking interdict this vehicle if it's going to keep going on this road because it's going away from the target compound." And so we pull the Panders off. We set up a hasty L shape, and I was a saw gunner, right? So it was literally just me and my team leader, and I think another dude that were on the long leg of the ambush. And he's like, "Hey, like, is that thing going to work?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it should fucking work. Like, I cleaned it today." He's like, "All right, if they do anything fucking sketchy at all, if they don't do exactly what we tell them, we're fucking gonna burn this car down because like we don't want to have the risk of them setting something off. Like we don't know what they got in the car. Like if they don't immediately follow everything that we tell them to do via our interpreter, we're gonna kill them." I was like, "All right, this is fucking real." And so we sat there for a while, and ISR kept watching them, and they eventually, I think that they saw us, and so they fucking turned around and they ended up going back to the target compound and were interdicted there by the SDF and the partner force. But that was the closest we ever got to doing anything. And then we did get blown out to the FLOT. I do remember that. They're like, "Oh, Russians are moving on the FLOT again. You guys need to get down there." So we had our bags and stuff staged so that we could respond to that type of mission. We had the Panders set up for sustainment, a bunch of cases of water, a bunch of MREs and rocket rounds and goose rounds and javelins, and plenty of linked ammunition. So we were very much ready to go and handle that if need be. So we drove down overnight one night. we got to our kind of ORP as the sun was coming up, which was really cool. Sat there for like 6 to 7 hours, and then they're like, we're good. They ended up not getting close to where we needed to be, so picked up and just drove back. The drive back was quicker, but I digress. So that was the highlights of the Syria trip for me.
Yeah, to add a little bit of
interesting things.
a little bit of like open source context.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, I mean, you guys were acting as the battle space owners, which I understand is pretty unusual for special operations to do that. It's usually conventional units that rotate in, and they're in command of the overall battle space. But you guys were essentially running actions on the fly, and in my understanding, it was a lot more similar to more of a conventional conflict because you had a set line of where the enemy was and where Daesh was and stuff. So yeah, that's definitely really cool, man. I remember there being a big stir when the strikers crossed into Syria initially back in 2017. The 375 guys.
Yeah,
I remember
they
that
had to
being
fly
a big
overt flags. I remember seeing the pictures from that too, and I was like, "This is sick."
Yeah, I
Yeah, no,
remember.
it was, we did have to act. We weren't obviously on the flot all the time. Like we had other missions to do. Like our mission set wasn't primarily flot, but yeah, because we were the battle space owners, if anything was going about to go down, specifically with, not necessarily the Syrian army, but any kind of like the Wagner Group or whoever else was in Syria, it was like, hey, like you guys need to get down here and kind of give us some more ass. Because it was primarily ODAs and some conventional infantry units that were the guys that were typically holding those forward positions.
Gotcha. So, coming back, and we can kind of go into that training cycle a bit now, leading up
Yep.
to the Dwyer deployment. Tell me about that, man.
Wasn't too crazy. I don't really remember a whole lot, honestly. We did a big company live fire that spring, which was really cool in Kentucky. The forward observations page. There's I can't remember the name of the video, but there was a solid day and night video from that, as well as I think the regiment itself has some recruiting footage from that. But it was this massive trench style objective with like a trench system, and then like some buildings off to the, I guess, the right side as you're moving towards the objective. And I was on a gun truck for that one, which was awesome. I didn't have to do any kind of running. I had a 240 mounted on one of those 1.1s, and I was just chilling in the door. And we were just a rolling base of fire for our the rest of the platoon, who was the maneuver element for the right side of the objective and some like structures. So we were rolling support by fire, engaging freaking targets, and I think we got to shoot at least one javelin, live javelin during that. One of the goose gunner for our platoon was the guy that got to shoot that. And overall, like, company live fires are some of the most fun you'll ever have, just because there's so much fucking ordnance and shit going on. For the people listening, yeah, if you can, I can't remember the name of the forward observations video, but there is a solid like nighttime footage as well as daytime footage of us just getting it, a whole company size support by fire machine guns, overhead, close air, freaking. I think we had, I don't know if it was Little Birds. I think they were Apaches that we had for close air, but they're out striking targets in depth while we're rolling in and engaging with 50 cals and 240s. Just a really fucking badass event. So that was kind of the highlight of the lead up to the 2019 deployment.
How many option 40s do you think that video netted?
Oh, I don't know, dude. Like a good amount. I hope so, because that was some solid freaking propaganda for sure. I would say at least, a solid freaking 50. But yeah, so we knew that we weren't deploying, so we knew that let's see, first and second platoon, I think we're slotted for Iraq, Syria that trip. And we were going to be slotted to stay back. I think it was BICO. It was definitely BICO that was Team BAF. And I can't remember what SECO was doing. I think they were Team Scorpion. So we were, going to be rear D. We're like, hell yeah, it's the fucking summer. We're going to do some fucking cool shit. We're going to do maybe a CAPEX. I was like, maybe I'll go to fucking sniper school. Like, it's going to be chill. And then while I'm on leave, I took offset leave that year for a close friend of mine's wedding. Her wedding was freaking like a week after leave was ending, so I got it shifted to the right. Um, and I remember getting a call. I was like going to the range with my buddy, and it was my squad leader was like, "Hey, be prepared to come back early from leave. Like we're getting fucking blown out." And I was like, "Okay, that's fucking crazy." I didn't think we were deploying. I thought we were good to go. Um, and turns out I didn't have to come back early, but as soon as we did get into work after I got back, it was like the week after the rest of the platoon, the rest of the company was back. They're like, "Hey, you guys are going," and we had like a couple days to get our stuff squared away. And they're like, "Hey, you guys are going to Helmand. You guys are standing up an expeditionary task force in the south with another tier 1 unit, and you guys are going to be doing helicopter vehicle interdictions." And we were like, "All right, cool." So we were the first people that stood that up. Kind of built out our own little compound, our own almost mini Camp Alpha in Dwyer, which was kind of a shithole of a base. The 82nd was the primary unit there, and they were pretty chill for the most part. Like we would work out in their gym, and they were out doing, people don't understand. It's like when you're not in special operations, you're out doing normal fucking base defense shit. You're sitting in a tower for fucking 8 hours to 12 hours a day, or you're freaking doing roving interior perimeter patrols, or maybe going a little bit outside the wire. Because Dwyer was like in the middle of fucking nowhere. Like there was nothing near it for the most part. Kind of a smaller base, but also not, definitely smaller than like BAF. But not as small as Scorpion, which is a pretty small little base, but very much conventional forces. And we were there with the tier 1 unit we were with the 160th asset, and we were going out and doing vehicle interdictions. So we were the QRF. That was the 3 Alpha curse continued because we were a very good platoon. Like we had a lot of senior team leaders, we had a lot of senior squad leaders, very senior platoon sergeant who'd been around for a while, and it was my squad leader when I first showed up, and then he took over as our platoon sergeant for the 18 and 19 deployments. And because we were so good and they could trust us, our battalion headquarters or command team trusted us. They're like, "Hey, we know you guys aren't going to be fucking dickheads if you guys go and work with a tier 1 unit." Which when you go and work with a tier 1 unit, though, you are now under them, and they're going to use you as a QRF more often than not, unless they have some kind of big objective planned.
And more on that, I understand that this special missions unit wasn't the typical one that you might have been used to working with.
I think I've talked about this, so I'll just name drop. It was blue, so it was SEALs, SEAL Team 6.
I wasn't trying to fish that out of you, but I'm
no,
I'm
you're
glad
good.
you said
I just remember that I have
it.
talked about it in the past, so it's like, all right, I've worked with both. I've worked with Delta and Dev Crew. It was their first time back in Afghanistan for a while, and I'm not gonna talk shit on them. I think that they're killer of what they do. However, some of them is their first deployment, which I think was just kind of mind-boggling for me at that point, where it's like, hey, this is a tier 1 dude. This is his first deployment to the Middle East ever. He might have gone to the Philippines or somewhere else, but it was my third at this point. If you can count. I mean, I count the first one I went on as a deployment, even though it was only 5 weeks. But it was like, damn, like how do you get to a tier 1 unit, especially during the GWAT, and you haven't gone on a deployment yet, which kind of just shows that the SEALs weren't super utilized past, I think, like 2013, 2014 in Afghanistan. So that was kind of interesting to work with them, kind of learning their different TTPs and like working with their leadership. Luckily, my platoon leader and my platoon sergeant, were very good at working with their leadership because they wanted us to do some dumb shit all the time. And they were very good at standing their ground and be like, "No, that's fucking stupid. You guys should do it this way," as tactfully, obviously, as they could. However, some of the missions they wanted to do some wild shit. Like they wanted to do a halo jump into an objective, like for a traditional style raid. And it's like, we probably shouldn't do that. Like this is our fucking bread and butter. We don't need to get fucking crazy with it. This isn't fucking Bin Laden we're going after. It's fucking shithead number 1011 on the list. Like we don't need to use those kind of assets to fucking go and execute this. We can take helicopters and we can offset and we can walk. Like that's going to be fine. We promise. But that was a very interesting deployment. We would go out and we'd sit in these DLSs, desert landing sites, or I don't know if that's the correct acronym. Basically, you just sit and loiter with the engines going it, or the auxiliary going it. I don't remember the correct aviation term for it, but basically the rotors weren't moving, but like the auxiliary power was still on. So there's that constant whining of the motor, or the auxiliary power in those Chinooks. And we had Kteh Khas with us at this point. So some of them would be with the blue guys on the 60s and the little birds, and then we were on the 47s, obviously. We kind of had a rotation shift going of which kind of group of guys, because we were in a full platoon. We had a platoon in Kandahar, or a squad rather, in Kandahar at that point, running Kteh Khas training actually, and they were with some MARSOC guys as well, from what I understood. So we were kind of a smaller, less than platoon footprint. So we kind of just split up into just group 1, group 2 kind of style of who's going to be on kind of call for today, who's going to be going out on the helicopters for QRF. Yeah, we'd just be sitting out in the desert for freaking hours at a time, waiting for these cars we were watching to go into, they call it green terrain, or like basically a terrain that is approved to go in, like there's not going to be a high risk of collateral damage if this car decides to freaking blow up or something. And Blue would go snatch the guys, and then we'd cross load prisoners onto ours, and we'd take the dudes back with the Kteh Khas with whoever we snatched off target. So that was what we did for the majority of that deployment, was vehicle interdictions on dudes coming over the border from Iran, or suspected people, collaborating with ISIS targets in Iraq, or Afghanistan rather. Sorry.
Did these VIs get kinetic at all, or was it a pretty administrative procedure?
It was pretty administrative. I think there was one. I wasn't on it. I was on one of the prisoner transfers, because we were out in a different area towards the end of the deployment. I don't remember the fucking name of the base. It was the Italian base out.
Was out near
east.
Herat?
Yeah, Herat. Thank you. So we were out in Herat for we'd go out for like a week at a time, 2 weeks at a time, living in tents on Herat, on the base there. And I was on I was an acting team leader at this point. I wasn't a full NCO. I was still a specialist. However, one of the team leaders of my squad was having a kid that summer, so he couldn't deploy. So I kind of stepped up and was a fill-in team leader role. And so they trusted me with some of the tasks of like, hey, like you're going to go take one of these guys, one of the other Rangers, and you guys are going to fly to Bagram from Herat, and you guys are going to go transfer this prisoner to the CIA or whoever the fuck wanted them in Bagram, which was, kind of interesting. I got to fly around, got to, kind of run around Afghanistan, basically just another Ranger, just hanging out and figuring shit out as we went. So I was on a prisoner transfer. I was staying in Bagram overnight before my flight out the next day, back to Dwyer, and then back to Herat. And I remember one of my buddies texted me on freaking Signal, and he's like, dude, they just got into some shit. And I don't think it was any Rangers that got the shoot. It was just the blue guys ended up having to freaking smoke the guys in the vehicle. But we only got kinetic just once on that trip, and I wasn't there for it. I was pissed. But most of them kind of, surrendered without a fight. Like, it was a very easy process. But we did pull a lot of weapons out of vehicles. Like, these were actual dudes, bad dudes that were out doing it. It wasn't just kind of dirt farmers that were in the wrong vehicle at the wrong time kind of thing.
So yeah, coming back from Dwyer, are you still a saw gunner at this point? Or are you moving on to be a team leader, a gun team leader? Like, what's sort of the deal for you as you come back from that helmet deployment?
Yeah, so I was pretty much a team leader at that point. I would sometimes carry the saw, just depending on the day. If we had an actual NCO, they'd be like, all right, we need a saw gunner. So I would grab the saw. Came back, went to basic leader course, and then I moved on to weapons squad, and I was a NCO. In weapons squad, I was the gun 2 team leader coming back. So beginning of 2020. Or I guess end of 2019, beginning of 2020, which we can talk a little bit about. I'm not going to.
Yeah, I know something kicked off, and you're welcome to go in as little detail as you can, because I know certain documents were signed prior to this. I know we talked a bit about that offline, but yeah, man, as much as you want to get into it, I know it was a pretty geopolitically charged situation with what was going on. Not going to get into specifics, but anyone can kind of Google what was going on in that early 2020 time period in the Middle East.
Yeah. So we ended up responding to that. We got blown out on fucking like New Year's. So flew over, freaking got in country. Some of the dudes were in Baghdad proper, and then our platoon was out on another base. And yeah, we were partnered with Delta out there as well, and some shit went down on the night of the 7th, and we thought it was going to be fucking kind of over for us, but nothing happened. Nothing ever fucking happens, it seems, to 3 Alpha. We have, I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse, because it's like, it was definitely a blessing at that point that nothing ever happened, because we might have, because of our presence in Iraq, in the 3 Alpha curse of nothing ever bad happens to us, or nothing ever kinetic rather happens to us, that maybe we saved the U.S. from getting into some crazy shit with Iran. Just a theory of my own. But yeah, we were there for a few weeks, middle of the training cycle, and then we were slotted again our company was slotted to be Team BAF for 2020. We blew out for that, which is, one of the hallmarks of the Ranger Regiment. We can be anywhere in the world within 18 hours, aircraft permitting. That was the thing we ran into, is we didn't have enough aircraft for the assets we wanted to get off the ground. But that was a kind of a funny incident. I'll kind of go back to the start of that. It was like the 30th, I think January 30th. And we had just barely taken IRC, I guess, or we were taking IRC, which is the immediate reaction company, the guys that are basically on call. We either took it that night or like the night we were supposed to be picking it up the next day on the 31st of 2019. And I remember I was out, drinking with my buddies. I don't think we were supposed to be out drinking. We were trying to keep it, pretty tame night for us at least. And get back, go to sleep. And I get woken up by one of my privates calling me. It was like fucking 6 a.m. I'm like, what the fuck is this dude calling me at 6 a.m. on a fucking weekend? Because I'm pretty sure it was a weekend. And I fucking answered the phone. I was like, what the fuck you want? Like, oh, this is specialist fucking so-and-so with the MPs on Hunter. He's like, we got your fucking private here. He got arrested for DUI last night. And he said to call you. And I was like, God fucking damn it. Like, I don't know why he chose to call me. He's technically not even my guy. And I was like, God damn it. So I call his team leader, his actual team leader, and he's like, God damn it. He's like this very serious, kind of older dude. He was an import from the big army. Dropped his officer commission to come to regiment. Really solid dude, fucking very stand-up dude. Very much all about the Ranger shit, but was kind of, very much new to this whole thing. Anyway, so he called our squad leader, and then 30 minutes later, hey, come into work, because we were on IRC, and like we had a fucking private underage guy got a DUI while we were on IRC. So our first sergeant was not very happy with us. So we come in, we thought we were about to go do like a 12-mile or some shit. And he's like, no, everyone's going to pack 2 standard for IRC. He's like, I don't know if you guys are paying attention to what's going on in the world, but there's some shit going on in Iraq with the embassy and, shit going on with Iran and Iraq stuff. He's like, we might get a call here. And we're like, yeah, fucking whatever. Cool. So we pack out, we get released. I go to fucking get breakfast with my buddy, come back to the barracks, and as we're walking to our room on the 3rd floor, this fucking other private from another platoon starts running through the hall. He's like, hey, we're getting called back in again, and we're going back into work. And we're like, yeah, shut the fuck up. I sit down, go to the bathroom, get the call. Hey, come into work. It's real this time. We're like, God damn it. So that's kind of what kicked that whole thing off, and that's what kind of jump started the shit show of the year that was 2020 was that whole incident. So I was already primed for the rest of the bullshit the rest of the year brought, but yeah, no, very interesting time. We had a contingency in place that we would have to help with the embassy evacuation. If it got to that, we kind of had a plan drawn up, and that was potentially going to get super interesting as well. But we were fine. They ended up rotating us out of country, and we came back, finished up the training cycle, and then our platoon was told, "Hey, you guys aren't going to be Team BAF." We were like, God damn it, what the fuck. So 1 and 2 Alpha were Team BAF for this trip, and they're like, hey, we need guys with top secret clearances to go work in the JOC, and we can't take them from the other 2 platoons. So 3 Alpha give up some names for JOC NCOs, and I had my TS. So I got put in the arena to go work in the task force JOC in at BAF. And leading up to that, we had to do, like, at this point, COVID was a thing, and we had to do a legit, like, fucking 2-week quarantine. They locked us in battalion headquarters, and I've talked about this kind of a few times on my own channel. They locked us in. They're like, "Hey, bring as much booze as you want." Mistake on that part, and it just devolved into a 2-week long frat party. It was a good time. Deployed to Afghanistan, and then I was the JOC NCO for the main strike force.
Yeah, I know there was a decent bit going around in some of the meme pages about what was going on, kind of around Hunter, and I believe there may have been a issue with Third ID's DFAC or something like that.
I don't really remember because we got plenty of food.
I gotcha.
We got fed. I mean, I brought some of my own food, but like they were consistent about bringing in the trucks because they would truck food in. Like they'd go through like an airlock kind of thing.
Right.
They like switch out drivers. It was really kind of hilarious, the lengths that they went to, because it was still, I guess, kind of new. This was the spring of 2020, so like people still didn't really know how bad it was going to get, so they went a little bit overboard with it. But yeah, no, it turned into a freaking interesting time.
How'd you feel about going over as a JOC NCO?
I was pissed, to be honest.
Gotcha.
I was pissed because I was like, damn, we're Team BAF and then my platoon's not even over here, and you guys are putting me in the JOC where I get to fucking just watch whatever fucking happens and not get to be on the ground. Like, this is fucking bullshit. And I remember my CO, we were out drinking behind the cough one night, and he was like, "Oh, don't get too mad about it. Like, we'll get you out on target." And I was so fucking mad when he said that. I was like, that's literally what every single fucking CO has like said to our platoon or to me personally, like my entire career up to this point. I was like, I know that's a fucking lie. You don't got to fucking try and, fleece me or whatever the fuck. Like, I was like, no, that's a lie. I was fucking like half a handle of rum in at this point. And I got so mad. I was like, you know what? Fuck this. I'm going to go put on my ruck and I'm going to do fucking laps around the compound, around our little quarantine area until the fucking sun comes up. Just, I don't know, one of those weird drunk ideas you get that you have to fucking fulfill. So I went and signed out obviously a cleared machine gun from the arms room, loaded my ruck up, and I just started doing laps while everyone else was still partying. I was drunk until about mile 7. And then I was like getting tired. I was like, you know what, whatever. Like, I'm not going to walk till morning because that's like still a few hours out. I'm just going to finish up and I'm going to do a 12-miler and we'll call it good at that. So finished up, did a 12-miler, did it under standard, carrying a machine gun and intoxicated.
Just straight,
went to sleep.
Straight hate and discontent keeping you going.
Literally, I was so fucking mad. I don't know if you ever been mad that you just want to go walk for fucking hours carrying fucking heavy shit, but I was at that point. So yeah, I got overseas, and the job itself was actually pretty cool. Like, seeing that side of like how Ranger operations how they work at the larger level and larger scale. Even though because of COVID, they were like not authorized to basically do any kind of targets or hit any objectives, as well as the fact that the Taliban, we had the peace deal with the Taliban, so we weren't hitting any of their targets, and ISIS-K was kind of chilling. Like, they weren't really doing a whole lot that we could do anything against. I think the ETF-A, the guys down in Dwyer, got to do one raid that we watched. I want to say that they did, and I think it was a blue guy that smoked one of the dudes on target, so we got to see that live, which was fun. But other than that, we were just doing kinetic strikes pretty much on ISIS-K targets of opportunity for the majority of that trip.
Was that dwindling down at all, the kinetic strikes, or were they still going pretty strong?
We were going pretty strong. At least, early summer of 2020, like late spring, early summer. And we had a kill count going on one of the boards. I don't remember how many fucking targets we hit, but it was almost one a night, at least up until around August, like late July, early August was when it kind of started slowing down a decent amount. But like during the peak kind of fighting season the drone pilots were really getting after it. Rangers, not so much. And that was we didn't even really talk about the 2019 BAF deployment because I had buddies on that one. Complete opposite, complete polar 180 of what 2019 BAF was compared to 2020. 2019 BAF guys were freaking getting it. gotten a lot of freaking engagements, killed a lot of dudes. We took a few casualties on that trip, but no KIAs, fortunately, thanks to our amazing medics.
There's a really good article out there. I think it was in the Army Times, and it kind of talks about what happened that night on that objective and the actions of the two medics.
Yep. Well, one of them is one of my close friends. He was my roommate.
I gotcha.
So, we were able to. He showed me at work one of the days on his laptop because on a classified actual government laptop, he had the ISR footage from this from the actual event, and that shit was fucking insane.
I mean, they were at the point where they were pumping blood into dudes on target to keep them alive.
Well, yeah,
right?
that's the whole. That's kind of why they got the recognition they did it, because that was the first utilization of the roller program in combat, like actual combat. They got a dude, if I remember correctly, I think it was a pressure plate that he stepped on, blew off both of his legs and his most of his right arm. So triple amputee. They started taking contact from the entire village just about. They were able to quell that for a little bit, and then they were moving him to an HLZ. And it's like this, there was like this wood line to the south, I think, or like to the bottom, opposite, like kind of in the direction they were traveling. But they were kind of on the edge of this wood line, waiting for the choppers to come in, and kind of like a little bit of this mini defilade, like a little bit of this berm stuff they were behind, a little bit of cover. And you can see on the ISR footage, there's dudes creeping in the fucking wood lines with AKs and PKMs. And they got engaged in a close ambush while they're on the HLZ, waiting while they're in the middle of treating the casualties. There was, I think, 2 casualties on that one. Obviously, the triple amputee was the worst off. And they ended up calling in danger close fires and killing the dudes. They sent a squad to sweep through the wood line, which was super sketch to watch. I was like, God damn. Like, oh, that's like kind of the spooky shit, because it was a pretty dark night, if I remember correctly. The loom wasn't very good. But yeah, they were able to flush him. They pumped, I want to say, 4 units. I want to say it was 4 units of blood on site at the point of injury for the most part. And then they flushed him and got him to Germany, and then from Germany to the U.S. in one go, which, yeah, you can look up the articles about that with Sergeant Davis, Staff Sergeant Davis, and the actions everyone took to get him back to the States and ultimately saved his life.
Yeah, it really sort of holds true to that, the thing they say about the regiment, where most deaths that were preventable, there's never been a preventable death, is what I'm trying to get at in the Ranger Regiment, as far as I understand. And that's part of the the comprehensive medical program that you guys run.
The best medics in the world.
Yeah, I know every ranger gets RFR, and a couple guys get to go do EMT and stuff, get AFR. So it's definitely cool. Was that your second last deployment, that Team BAF JOC RTO one, SAO one?
Yep, that was the second to last. So I was like, all right, cool. Like, and kind of read the writing on the wall with the Taliban ceasefire. I was like, well, we're not going to be here for much longer. We were already starting to kind of draw down like personnel and manpower and kind of stuff in country at that point, like, because everyone knew we were leaving Afghanistan. We just didn't know when. So it was like, all right, we don't need to have this big of a footprint. We can start kind of closing stuff down. And it started like already at that point. And then so came back from that and went into a training cycle as a team leader, a fire team leader, because I was technically the gun team leader for that Iraq blowout, and then the rest of the training cycle, and then came back and was a regular line fire team leader with one of my close private buddies, and then the import who ended up getting promoted to squad leader, which was insane because he didn't even have any fire team leader time. But because of his time in service and all this stuff, he hit E6, and they made him a squad leader. So they put me and my buddy, who were both the senior team leaders in the platoon at the time, kind of underneath him. And we were like basically told to help him out as best we can, because he kind of was like learning on the job, which is very atypical typically for Ranger Regiment. Usually the dudes have at least a year or 2, if not 3, of team leader time, at least when I had shown up, before they got promoted or were eligible to be a squad leader. So that training cycle, I don't remember a whole lot of it, but we were slotted to go to Iraq for this one. Our platoon was, and yeah, we went to Iraq in the early months of 2021.
Career progression wise, are you a sergeant at this point, and
Yep.
are you thinking about staying in, taking the long walk, or getting out? What's sort of your thoughts at this time about what you want to do with your future?
Yeah, so it was definitely coming to that point. By this point, I did start my brand, Rockwell Designs. I started that kind of like while I was sitting in the JOC in Afghanistan. I was like, you know what, I need to figure out some kind of side hustle or something. We had a bunch of downtime because of COVID. Like there'd be like, we had to quarantine when we got back, and then we'd go on leave, and then we had another 2 weeks of quarantine. So there was like almost a fucking, month and a half period where I was like not doing shit. So like I needed something to fill my time, and I ended up teaching myself how to sew, and kind of started a niche brand for the Kalashnikov series and like 308 pattern rifles for chest rigs. But we can get into that a little bit later. So I was running that, and then it was coming up on the end of my contract. I had about a year left when we left for Iraq. And so it's like, all right, if I want to reenlist, I got to do it over here. So, I can get the tax bonuses, all that stuff. And the options kind of to me were, and I just released a video about talking about my ETS. It was like, all right, do I do the long walk, which means that I have to stick around and be on the line in Ranger Regiment for, probably till I'm a squad leader, which means, another 2 to 3 years before I have the best odds of passing selection. Which I saw the writing on the wall. Like we were drawing down in Afghanistan. Like the other platoons were like, everyone was pretty much in BAF for the most part, helping with the drawdown and maintaining security on that airfield before we left. There's a really solid video about that too on the 75th official page. It's like a 7-minute video of the drawdown in BAF. For any of you guys that are listening out there that haven't seen it, go check it out. So I was like, all right, cool. Afghanistan's closing, which means we're not deploying every year. I don't like that. I joined to go to war. I don't want to sit in peacetime army or peacetime regiment. So it was weighing between the two, and it was like I was kind of ready at that point in my life to kind of go and do something different. I kind of was maybe not burnout, but I was like, man, like either I commit and we're like really make this, because at that point it's like kind of making the decision to stick it out till 20, because if I do try out for a special mission unit, that's at least another 2 to 3 years before I get my shot. If I end up passing, I'll be at my 10-year mark essentially, and it's like I'm not going to fucking, I would probably going to end up doing 20 years at that point. So that was really the kind of decision I was at, because I was right about 7 years, just about in 6 years ish. Let's say I joined in 15, so yeah, it was about 6 years. Since I joined the Army. And that was kind of, we were working with the Tier 1 unit as well in Iraq, so I got to pick their brains a lot about it. One of them was a former 175 Ranger who I had actually worked with in 2018 in Syria. Fucking fantastic dude. Just an absolute, you'd look at him and you wouldn't know that he was a fucking Delta operator, which is kind of how a lot of them are. He looked very unassuming aside from the fucking look in his eyes. But he was a freaking stud, fantastic shot, phenomenal shooter, and was physically, like endurance wise, he was a freaking animal. He didn't look, the most, like freaking cut. He didn't have freaking a 6-pack or nothing like that, but the dude was very much in shape and could very much kill you with his pinky if you wanted. So I talked to him a lot about kind of that decision. He's like, and I talk about in my other videos, I kind of regret not sticking around to try out. To be honest, because that had kind of been a goal in the back of my mind ever since I had first learned about Delta Force prior to joining the Army. I read Inside Delta Force by Eric Haney, like every summer religiously, like when I was in high school and middle school. And he was like, hey, if you have even the idea that you want to do it, you should try it. You should at least put your name in the hat to get the chance to come and try out. And I was decided against that. I should have listened to my friend's advice, but I digress.
If you want to talk a bit about that Iraq deployment, I know that's where the sort of the infamous Ranger Inn was. If you want to go into detail about that,
what do you know about the Ranger Inn? Who's been telling about Ranger Inn?
Oh, there's a dude named Zach on YouTube. Don't know if you've heard.
Oh
of him. Yeah.
the Ranger Inn. Did I talk a whole lot about that? I can't remember. Hopefully not too much because there was
As
some
much
stuff
as
that
much
I'm not going
detail
to talk
as you're comfortable with.
about. Yeah, so we that was some of our good some of the best living conditions that I had. I had my own room. We had our own like house of Rangers. There was only 10 of us in the place where we were at. The rest of the platoon was located elsewhere. Again, partnered with tier one element, but they are primarily doing raids. Our targets in the area that we were in. So it was primarily training our. We would train, I think 3 or 4 days out of the week. It was like 3 range days, and then we'd do like an FMP on the last day, and then we'd get a couple days off, like 3 days off, and then the groups would rotate out, and we'd get another group the next week. So one week of training curriculum that we'd write would work for like 3 weeks, which was pretty solid. We had internal terps on the camp we were on, and then we also had like kind of local terps that we worked with on the ranges. Really, honestly, some of the most fun I've ever had. The camp we were on was very much a commando's paradise, if you will. Like free reign of the camp. Like I had a beer, I had my own vehicle, an up armored Land Cruiser 200 series. We were able to go out in the town, groceries or whatever we wanted. Chow Hall was good. They would cook really good meals. We could get ordered to go food from the city to the main gate of the base, and then we had like 3 or 4 different ranges on the camp that we could just go and on the burner phones we had the camp group chat, and they'd be like, "Hey, I'm fucking going hot on range, whatever." And you could just go and shoot whenever you wanted, and we had all the ammo in the world to facilitate that. So I ended up doing a lot of rifle shooting that summer, both on the range training with our partner force and as well as just on my own time. I'd be like, I'm going to go and I'm going to work on my 300-meter freaking, holds and just, group on a freaking IPSC at 300 yards with a red dot and a magnifier. So I was getting out there and just, getting a lot of good, just core shooting kind of training on my own.
Yeah, I was gonna ask.
So it was cool.
Being slightly familiar with that region, exactly how many shawarmas and hookahs did you guys body over there during your time?
How many what?
How many shawarmas?
Oh, shawarmas. Oh man, freaking a decent amount. I don't know how many in Syria, but in Iraq there was a significant amount. There was one place, I'm not going to say the name because it might give away where this location is, but there's one place that had like chicken burgers. They were like chicken sandwiches, but they had like the burger, like the buns. It was like a burger style bun that these chicken patties were served on, but it was like basically like the Chick-fil-A of Iraq. And we'd order like some, like on Friday nights was like kind of like I guess maybe not the party night, but like the chow hall would like kind of chill out, and like we'd just order food from the city or like get takeout essentially delivered. We'd order like 200 of these sandwiches, and some of them were spicy. You could get like a spicy one, you could get like a normal one, and that shit freaking slapped. It was awesome. But yeah, lots of shawarmas. We do shawarma nights as well, on some of those nights, and yeah, no, it was yeah, loved the food there. It was great.
So coming back and sort of closing out your time in regiment, how'd you get started on Rockwell Designs? You mentioned that it came up kind of when you were doing the JOC NCO thing in 20.
Hmm.
But as you're getting out, how's that process getting out? And at the same time, what's going on with the Rockwell Designs? If you kind of want to plug that, talk about it.
Yeah, sure. When I was on, JOC NCO duty, I was on there for like 12. It was like 12-hour shifts. I was the night shift. Um, and like I had, a top secret computer that I could had logins on, and there's like a shared drive, and I was just clicking through the shared drive one night and came across some like instructional Word documents, that our parachute riggers had made of, oh, here's how you make your own body armor, your own like kit, essentially, your own slick body armor carrier. And I was like, huh, that looks really kind of easy to do. And I started, thinking, I was like, I could, I've always kind of been a gearhead like my entire life, even before the military. Like when I played airsoft, always, liked gear. So I was like, huh, I like gear. Like I could maybe maybe start making my own. So I did a bunch of research. Like I had a lot of downtime and access to the internet while I was on that shift, and I kind of formulated a game plan. I was starting to get into the AK kind of platform at the time. I had ordered my first AK on layaway just to time it right, so when I got back to the States, I wouldn't have to. It wasn't just sitting in my FFL forever. So I had that coming. I was buying another AK off of a buddy, and I was like, oh, there's not really a whole lot of chest rigs or tactical gear made in the U.S. for the AK. So I was like, all right. I came up with a chest rig design. I wanted to be able to carry six mags and have medical capabilities and integrate with, industry standard 1-inch fast X buckles and have the option for dangler style pouch. So I drew this up on freaking just paper. Like I had no idea if it was going to work. Drew up the design, made an order for the machine. I had no idea how to run a sewing machine at all. Bought a machine, bought a bunch of material, shipped it all home. And when I got home, I just started just set up the machine and kind of went to town. Learned how to sew, taught myself how to sew, made the first couple prototypes, and then I did a production run, kind of just grew everything pretty much organically on Instagram. And yeah, kind of just took off from there. I know Blue Jean operator, Nick Ryan, who was also a former 175 Ranger. He was one of the first people to pick one up, and he was starting his YouTube career kind of at the time. So he ended up doing a very in-depth review and drove a lot of traffic to my Instagram page and my website. And that's kind of really one of the other things that helped kickstart the brand to where it kind of is now. It's nothing crazy right now. Like I don't have a huge following. I've got like 4,000 on Instagram. But it just evolved from there. I started doing, different camo patterns, different colors. I ended up making some SMG style rigs for like MP5s or CZ Scorpions, stuff like that. I took a break after I moved away from Savannah after I got out of the Army. And then I just kind of started picking back up to do it. I don't know if it's going to be a very long-term thing. It's mostly a hobby. It brings in some, a little bit of cash, but nothing like to write home about per se. But it's mostly just something that, I've always been kind of a creative person, and I've always liked guns, and it's kind of a good little combination of the two that allows me to make some cool shit and, kind of express myself and make a little bit of money while I'm doing it.
That's solid, man. Is there sort of a online storefront where people can purchase, some of the gear that you sell? Is there an Instagram page?
Yeah, so you can find my website is Rockwell-Designs.com. I don't have anything gear-wise for sale right now. I've got some merch, but I kind of am starting to do a pre-order style of orders or like dropping, just because it's like I like to kind of know how much I got to make beforehand, and then I give an estimated lead time to my guys, and then freaking ship it out. So I just closed my pre-orders recently. I'm waiting on some material to come in to get a batch out, and then I'm probably going to take a small hiatus as we get into the summer here. Got some other projects that I want to work on. So, but yeah, you can find it there, or you can follow me on Instagram at Rockwell Designs Actual. But eventually, I do want it to be, that's kind of more of a passion project. And I want to do it right. I want to be able to have my own kind of manufacturing facilities, because one of the key tenets is like, I don't want to outsource to somewhere outside the US to make this stuff. Like I like very compliant. I like it being made in the US. So ideally, maybe one day I'll have my own kind of manufacturing setup, so I can actually make these at scale. And actually run it more so as a proper business versus kind of just a dude with a sewing machine and a dream. But yeah.
That's awesome, man. I mean, shit, Caleb Cry probably started out in a garage somewhere in Brooklyn, so
yeah. I mean, it's like Spiritus. Like I've been following Spiritus as well as Farrow Concepts, both gear companies that were started by veterans. At least I'm pretty sure Farrow was. I know I know Spiritus for sure was started by Adam he was in the 10th Mountain Division, I want to say. But yeah, he started in a garage. He had a couple business partners initially, and that's kind of what I got to figure out, is how to kind of get away from the day-to-day sewing operations, because it's like that's not where my most valuable use of my time would be. It would be in either designing new products and refining and making sure that those are refined and high quality enough, and then having this sewing done by someone else. I have a few buddies. Javelin Concepts is another one that's actually a 175 Ranger. He started that one. It's a little bit smaller. They do plate carriers and such, but he's got some really high quality stuff. And I just need to like get in touch with some of these guys and kind of learn how they were able to go beyond just the garage or the solo man operation.
Yeah, no, it's definitely awesome that end users are now going out and making their own kind of gear just tailored after what they did, and instead of relying
Yeah.
on some of these bigger companies. Tell me
I
about
mean,
the
that's how
podcast.
Blackout. Yeah. So, podcast I started in the summer of 22. So I had been out for a few months at this point. And I was involved in like kind of, started getting into the online money making scene. I don't know how much of that, about like money Twitter and like maybe kind of like the hustle bros, and, obviously like the Tate brothers were kind of becoming big at that point. So I was in their program, and contrary to popular belief, it's not actually them inside it teaching the stuff, which is, should make sense. But they have really, really solid dudes inside the universities teaching copywriting, teaching freaking stocks, crypto, dudes that are like verifiable, like millionaires at whatever they're teaching. And I remember talking to, it was like a live like Q&A or some sort. And I kind of was like learning about personal branding and stuff. And I remember asking one of the dudes, he was the crypto professor and the average, like just the regular business professor. I'm like, hey, I'm thinking about starting a personal brand kind of thing. I don't know what I want to do with it, but what do you think? And it was kind of a stupid fucking question looking back on it. And th're like, well, yeah, what are you going to talk about? And I was like, well, I was in the army for a little bit, and they're like, well, talk about that. Like, just start with that. Start with what kind of thing, and you can develop it from there. And so that's what got me started. I remember the guy challenged me. He's like, go make a freaking TikTok within the next hour and post it. And I was like, all right, that's how it starts, I guess. And then I was like, I've kind of always wanted to do a podcast. I know every dude freaking talks about having one. But I think most of them are kind of a failure to launch, or are hard to get off the ground because they want that perfect, like Joe Rogan style setup, where it's like, I got a recording studio, I got a freaking producer, I got multiple camera angles. But it's like, dude, no, just fucking start with what you got. So it was just me recording myself on my phone for the longest time. And I was just talking about Ranger Regiment, because like there's not a whole lot of content out about Rangers from Rangers, which it was kind of a struggle mentally at first, because it's like, hey, like I was, raised to be a quiet professional. Like we would just shit talk fucking SEALs and dudes that would get out and immediately just start talking about stuff. But it was like, hey, if I approach this from a point of, honesty, like I don't ever want to inflate or lie about any of my experiences, and two, gear it more towards helping dudes learn about Ranger Regiment so that we can continue to supply the best quality of candidate for the unit. Because it's like I very much still love the unit and I want the best for it. So it's like, all right, like I can still kind of help out even though I'm out, by putting information out there that will attract the right type of person and or make someone potentially interested in joining the Ranger Regiment specifically. And that's kind of what blew me up, was just talking about my experiences. And I grew pretty quick within the first couple months. I remember I did like a video a day, and I started doing like normal YouTube videos as well, like kind of more vlog style content. And I've always kind of made videos growing up. Like we'd make movies with my cousins all the time, so I knew my way around a video editor. I knew how to film. I knew a little bit on how to make stuff engaging and exciting and clickbaity. But that's where that got started, and kind of just have been running. I've just recorded episode 49 with some Ranger buddies, like I was talking about earlier before we started. And it's cool just being able to bring on other dudes and dudes that I know, that gives them, they're all veterans. Like, I haven't brought an active duty homie on yet, but giving the chance for them to kind of talk about their story. And, who doesn't want to go on a podcast of some sort, even though it's most of the time run over Zoom.
Oh yeah.
But it works, like eventually one day I would like to have a good setup, but It's out there trying to provide information without one revealing too much, sensitive stuff, and two without trying to make a huge amount of fucking money off of it. It's nice. I don't make a whole lot from revenue, and I don't have any sponsorship deals, which is fine for me right now. Uh, and it's just trying to be an asset and give people something to listen to that's hopefully educational or somewhat entertaining for the most part.
No, that's solid, man. And I remember earlier you were talking about the book Kill Bin Laden is what kind of got you into soft, got you into regiment.
It was Inside Delta Force,
Inside Delta
actually.
Force. Sorry,
Yep.
sorry,
Mm-hmm.
mixed that one up. But yeah, I feel like podcasts are kind of becoming that modern day equivalent of that for young fired up dudes that just want to learn about what soft does, or if they're thinking about pursuing a career in soft. Like you said, channels and podcasts like yours kind of gives them a little bit of idea without going too much into the nitty gritty, going too much into the operational stuff. It's kind of one of the things I appreciate about your podcast. There's not a whole lot of we're going out shooting dudes in the face bravado. It's just straight up telling it like it is. Even
Well,
if
it's
you
like I never got to do that, so I'm not going to say that I did because I know that my fucking buddies, if I said, "Oh yeah, I freaking killed someone while I was in Ranger Regiment," they're going to be banging my line and be like, "You fucking piece of shit." It's like I don't want that. Like, I don't get anything out of lying on the internet. Like I'm gonna be straight up with you. Like you might have your own opinion of me if you knew me in the regiment. Like you might have, oh, he was a good guy, or oh, he was a piece of shit, like whatever. But one thing I will hopefully never be accused of is inflating or like trying to intentionally obfuscate facts and actually what happened. I might as the years pass, like I'll probably end up getting a few key details wrong if I retell stories and stuff, but it's never going to be intentional.
100%,
So I
man.
appreciate that.
And yeah, like we're in this interesting dynamic now where I hate using the word influencer, but it's out there that there's a proliferation of soft related media. You could kind of say with pages like Forward Observations and stuff like that coming out. I don't know what specific opinion you might have on all that that kind of stuff with the secrecy being lifted a little bit and soft being a lot more visible now than they were say 10, 15, 20 years ago.
I mean, I could go two ways on it. Yeah, like the secrecy and like the quiet professional, like that's still very, I mean, it's very much the case still, like for at least, definitely, Delta, definitely, Ranger Regiment. Like there's not a whole lot of us out there kind of talking about it. And again, I trust myself to kind of at least safeguard a lot of the secrets and a lot of the stuff. I don't need to be going out and telling everything that I know, because I got plenty more stories I could talk about. I just don't want to, just for the sake of the individuals involved or, whatever. But, forward observations, like one of the guys was a former Ranger actually. And some of the dudes got in trouble in the 2020 deployment because we were out doing some fast rope training, and one of the guys knows the one of the founders of Forward, and he sent him like pictures from that training and to Fog, and then they ended up on the page like that day. And I remember one of the senior NCOs got wind of it, and he was fucking pissed. And he's like, "Hey, you got to fucking tell him to go take that down because like we're still here, like they can potentially figure out what's going on." I think Forward, if you've been following the page at all, like I'm wearing their shirt right now for the people that can't tell. A lot of people hate on him for understandably so, but it's like one, he was a Ranger, like I'm pretty sure that I don't know if he's the main dude, but I know one of the founders is Ranger. Two, they've done a lot of good. They've raised a lot of money for the Green Beret Foundation. And I look at it as more of an art project more than anything. And it's just kind of war art. Like that's been around forever. Like you think about like who was it, Hemingway? I'm trying to think of like the famous World War II, All Quiet on the Western Front. Was that Hemingway? I don't know. I'm fucking kind of out of it. But like people have been talking and writing about war. You look at the fucking Iliad, like freaking ever since the dawn of human time, like war has been one of the most interesting topics that we like to talk about because it's so prevalent and so life changing for so many people. And it's like the medium is just shifting now to online versus print media or movies. I don't really see any difference between someone writing a book or someone starting an Instagram page about their experiences. There's really not that much of a difference in my mind. It's an expression of someone's experiences, and good for them if they can make money off of it. Like I don't think that they're intentionally doing it to try and be a sellout. It's when people start being not authentic with their experiences is where I think that I have the most problem, where people will inflate or lie or, you know, try and overhype a story to make extra money. You know, like you can be authentic and talk about your experiences without being a liar and a complete sellout. So that's kind of where I stand on pages like that.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a pretty intelligent way of looking at it. So closing out here, if there's a foundation you want to plug, a charity, something like that, as we kind of end the podcast here.
Sure, yeah. Sua Sponte Foundation would be the one. It's Ranger specific. They would always be sending us, you know, care packages while we were overseas. I think they do stuff for the entire regiment, but I know that they're headquartered in Savannah. Let me find their website real quick. Sua Sponte Foundation. But I would say if you want to help Rangers out, they help veterans as well.
Yeah, we can absolutely drop like a link tree or something like that in the
Yeah.
description. Get those links on there.
Yeah, so it's mostly 175 veterans that are working for them. Some of my buddies are there, and they host like shootings. They host like shooting competitions and a bunch of other really cool missions. And it's specifically, they're the ones that are kind of in charge of maintaining the memorial at First Battalion in the barracks. But they also do stuff for, you know, any ranger from any of the other battalions. But yeah, no, they were great. I remember I got to meet the founder at a pistol competition, and they really do help the boys out a significant amount. So I would say Sua Sponte Foundation is the one that I know that I can, you know, there's so many unfortunately scammy uh, foundations and charities out there, you know, like the Wounded Warrior Project kind of fiasco that kind of came to light where they weren't really using the funds for what they said they were using for. Um, but I know with Sua Sponte Foundation, that stuff gets used appropriately to help Rangers out. I know they helped out Sergeant Davis when he got injured as well. I can't remember what they were able to do for him, but you know, it's kind of to help out the community and the families of KIA Rangers, and you know, kind of keep their memories alive as well.
Well, awesome, man. I really appreciate you coming on. I know we
Yeah,
talked
appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
earlier about starting podcasts and stuff. And same deal with us. We're pretty low key kind of operation going on.
Yeah.
So yeah, it means a lot for you to come on. If you don't mind, just keeping you a little bit longer. If we can talk about some stuff offline.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm just gonna stop all the recording and stuff, and I'll get back to you in a second.